Hello, everyone. My name is Akhil, and today in my talk, I will be talking about politics and perspectives. So, perspective is a powerful tool in which we are able to see different conflicts and different moments through. Our perspectives are shaped by the people we surround ourselves with and the context that we place ourselves in on an everyday basis. So, before I get started, I'd like to ask you all a question. How many of you have ever been involved in a form of protest or social resistance movement? Raise your hand. Okay, so I'd say probably about maybe a little bit less than half. So that's sort of what I expected coming into this. And that ties back to my key theme of perspectives. What shapes your perspective and the implications that has on social resistance movements? And to dive into that further, talking about the Aragalaya. So, what is the Aragalaya? The Aragalaya, translated meaning struggle, was a pivotal moment in Sri Lanka's history, in which, regardless of ethnicity, social class, or other socio-political contexts, individuals and groups from around the country gathered at a central point in the Galle-Face Green to engage in protest, demanding change against the Rajapaksa government. So, as much as the Aragalaya served as a pivotal and revolutionary moment in Sri Lanka's history, it also served as a revolution for myself and in the development of my own perspectives as both a person and also somebody studying global politics today. So, in 2022, when my parents and my sisters and her friends first decided they wanted to visit the protest site, I didn't really know what to expect, and I was going into it somewhat blind. At the time, being a 9th grade student, I hadn't had the opportunity to engage with complex topics like social resistance movements, and even if I had, they had been limited to YouTube videos I had watched or classroom presentations I had listened to my peers give over a Zoom call. So in that sense, I was quite narrow-minded in my view. And I think that's what led to the gravity and the broadening of my own perspective that occurred when I first visited the site. I'll never forget when I first stepped foot onto that Galle-Face Green road. I was a little bit taken aback and overwhelmed by the numerous groups and individuals that had all come together for organized protest through different art forms, poetry, song, chants, and the compassion that all of these individuals had for each other also led to me developing an inherent sense of admiration for them. And that admiration further drove my curiosity in understanding what the implications of social movements are. And that is a passion that I carry with myself even today. So, as much as I would love to continue talking about my perspective, I think a key point of understanding resistance is looking at what shapes all of our perspectives on it. So, I'm sure as everyone is aware, within our own OSC community, we are all very privileged in the way that despite the protests in 2022 occurring only maybe a 20-minute drive away from our own homes in this area, or if living in Colombo, just outside your doorstep, we've remained relatively unaffected by the economic crisis that these individuals were protesting for. And that disconnect between communities is what leads to the skewed perspectives and misinformations that can undermine and delegitimize the essence of resistance. So, a few things I heard just when interacting within this community and interacting with my own friends and peers. I would hear people refer to the movement as a riot or as violent, using words with negative connotations to refer to a movement which I knew wasn't that. And if I had never visited the Aragalaya and stepped foot on that protest site, I would share that perspective. But that is why I wanted to unpack that and understand why those implications are formed and why is it important to address them. The main implication of the Aragalaya was seeking political reform from the Rajapaksa government. And a term that I commonly hear people referring to it as well as myself sometimes, as unfinished. And because of that unfinished nature, it becomes inherently ineffective. But that statement is not true in any sense, as the Aragalaya, which seeks to achieve immediate political change, in that way, it was able to achieve that, as for the first time in history, a president was actually forced to resign from his position of power as a result of the demands of the people. And in that way, by calling the Aragalaya ineffective, is to undermine the voices of the people who are taking place in those protests for hours and hours on Gullface Green. And by undermining those implications, we're narrowing our view. This comes down to perspective and the context that we place ourselves in. By disconnecting ourselves from other communities, we'll never truly be able to understand the essence of resistance and how important resistance is to the evolution of our social and political contexts. And that leads me on to the global perception. Today, we see numerous instances of Aragalayas occurring all over the world, whether that be in the US or Canada or Australia, where people from university campuses band together to fight to voice their concerns over the justice and the humanitarian concerns in Gaza. Whilst they may be different in their ethnicity, their social contexts, they're united under the same belief of justice. And perspective is the tool that enables them to achieve that change. And why should we all care about perspective, about resistance? Well, resistance is the fundamental tool that is needed to seek change. If you think about any achievement in human history which we can be proud of, whether that be the abolition of slavery, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, all of these issues have been addressed through the voices of the people and their ongoing demand for change. And what drives that? A joint perspective. And coming back to the theme of unfinishedness, resistance in itself can never truly be finished. And in the case of the Aragalaya, that word is no longer used to refer to the many little social movements that occur in Colombo on an everyday basis. But does that mean that Aragalaya has died or that resistance has died? No. Because the fragments left behind by the Aragalaya and the new perspectives which carry on that legacy is what shapes the future and facilitates change. And it is what will drive, and it is what will allow people to continue demanding for socio-political equity. And I'd like to finish this with a quote from Arundhati Roy, in which he says, "There's no such thing as a voiceless person, only the preferably unheard or the deliberately silenced." And in saying this, I'm not asking all of you to go out after this talk and to scream and demand change. But the one thing I want to discover for myself and for everybody here is that by opening your mind to new perspectives, by surrounding yourself with other people with different perspectives from different contexts, that is what facilitates a greater future in which all of our voices can be heard. Thank you.